morning, guys. How are you all doing today? My name is Frank. I'm going to be your guide and driver for the day. What this is driver's tips for today. Is drivers forget to tell people. Just simple things. Do you know what I mean? Could save your life. Do you know, Paddywagon get back. We're the best company in Ireland for it. We get back 80% of the people every day. Isn't that good? Best in Ireland, honestly. Okay, guys, if we just have a quick read of that and just pass it through the bus, yeah? Guys, it's a beautiful morning today. By the way, who brought out the sun this morning? Hands up, who brought the sun with them? I just can't all brought it with us. Well, when you leave, please leave it here, because it's very seldom we get it. I just want to say about this tour, right? This is my favourite tour of the whole Paddywagon Tours, right? Yesterday I was on the Cliffs of Moher, and that was my favourite tour. Tomorrow I'm going to be on Wicklow, and that'll be my favourite tour. Yeah, no, guys, this is a great tour. And we're going up to the north of Ireland. As people know, do you know what I mean? It's you've all heard of the troubles up the north, didn't you? Yeah. So your bulletproof vest is under the seat and your helmet. So when we get to the border, I want you all to arm yourselves and, do you know what I mean? Get ready for the guys. Honest to God, this tour is amazing, right? Particularly when it's a day like today, right? Because we're going to go up to the Antrim coast. The Antrim coast is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Do you know? But you know, just to give you the only thing different you'll notice about going over the border, right? The only thing you'll notice, do you see this yellow line here on the left? The continuous yellow line? Just here, can everybody see that on the left? If you look out the window there, you'll see it on the left. That yellow line will turn white. That's it. Well, mind you, the cows have fish heads and the sheep have giraffe heads. But that's the only difference you'll notice. 3, 2, 1. Are you ready, guys? Hang on, hold on. I don't believe in the good luck, bad luck, you know. I think people, you know, create their own surroundings, or it's created for them, you know. And in my case, growing up, my surroundings was created for me. Yeah, no, my name is Frank. I'm 50 years of age. I come from a place called Drimnagh in Dublin. I grew up in the 60s, around the 60s, went to school in a place in Drimnagh. In my junior infants, yeah, I suppose, you know, looking back on it, it was a traumatic time in my life. I have a brother and 3 sisters. My dad worked on the railway all his life, from the age of 15. The area I came from wasn't it was a very poverty-stricken area, you know. And the smell of oil always resonates with me because it reminds me of my dad's donkey jacket, because that's what I slept in. You know, I'd wait till he came home from work, 7:30 in the evening, and then I'd go to bed with his jacket. Because up to the late 70s, Ireland was a third world country. There was no jobs, there was no, you know, you could hardly see a new car. You know, we were in our own little bubble, coming out of the recessions, not even recessions, sorry, the civil wars, the wars of independence, you know, we didn't have anything. We didn't feel that we were deserving of anything, really. I mean, the first day at school, I ran away, you know. And the first day in school, I got slapped by the nuns. Sorry, the second day when I went back, and from that day, I mean, it was a constant battle, you know. Not that I didn't want to learn, I didn't know how to learn because nobody took the time to sort of, you know, see what way I was or how I reacted to things. And there was no concern, and it was just 43 kids in a classroom, and you just sat there and you learned or you didn't learn. I don't remember ever in my upbringing the word love being mentioned in my house. Never mind it showing you, but the word ever being spoken. And that is pretty, do you know what I mean, sad. You know, for I'm sure my mum loved me, I'm sure my dad loved me, but the way they expressed it wasn't really the way you should express love and things. And because they didn't know themselves. Where I came from, there was a big field, it's a circle, and there was a football pitch in the middle. I was a good footballer. And you know, I scored a goal, right? And these kids came over and started hugging me, and I loved it. And I remember it well, and I scored lots of goals. I think I'm still the record holder for the most goals scored in Drimnagh. I swear to God. And, you know, I loved scoring goals, I loved playing football because of the feeling it gave me. But outside of that, that was it. That was the only time. The first ever drink, I still remember it, was I had stolen a bottle of gin from the house, from the Christmas kind of drink. And my friend had stolen a bottle of wine from his family. And I remember the two of us sitting in the field, and he takes a sip of the wine and he goes, "Oh, that's horrible." And I had that bottle of gin up we had an outside toilet in the house, and up at the cistern, I had it on top of the cistern, and I had it for like 6 or 7 days. So every time, just before I go out playing, I'd go into the toilet and I'd take 3 or 4 glasses of this, and I'd go out and I'd be very drunk before I even went outside the house, you know. And then we'd go into the fields and drink more. And then as soon as I had drunk, maybe 3 or 4 glasses of that gin and maybe a half bottle of wine, I was likely to do anything. You know, I became a very, very bad person. Very aggressive and angry. Yeah, I dropped out of school at the age of about 14. I was running riot anyway. I was drinking every night. I was stealing cars. I was in somebody's house one time and they had a jar of pills. I just took a handful of them, you know. And when I took that drug, the first time I ever took it, I put it in a needle and I injected it into my arm. When you take your first injection, you really kind of what they call skin popping into it. But I put it straight into my vein, and I went to the place where I wanted to go. And that's where I wanted to be all the time. It took every feeling I ever had out of me. I didn't have a care in the world. I actually felt like a king. As soon as that ran out, I was straight down looking for heroin. And I took heroin for the next 3 years. Taking drugs and you know, it comes with the costs and the price you have to pay, which is to buy drugs. So you have to steal and you have to do whatever you need to do to get drugs. And I did whatever it took to get drugs, you know. And I obviously am ashamed of a lot of the stuff that I did, but I have to take responsibility for it because it was me that did it. Now, I wasn't aware that I wasn't dealing with my issues. I wasn't dealing with the core of the problem. Because, you know, drugs and drink and whatever I took to get out of it like that, you know, using it as a sedative or use it as an anesthetic or whatever you want to call it, right, to numb the pain. But I didn't know what the pain was, you know, so I wasn't able to address it. I was completely out of control when I was on heroin. After about 3 years, I got caught by the police and they gave me a choice of going to a rehab or 3 months in jail. I went into a place called the Rutland Centre, which was a famous rehab for alcohol. They let me in for free, actually, because they wanted to start doing a drug rehabilitation program, and they needed some guinea pigs. And I remember, because it was the first day I wasn't using, and I thought, this is not bad. After about 3 days, I just got this belt of just, wow. It was, the way I describe it, it was like somebody throwing tar over your body, and you just can't, you know, and then you have the hots and the colds and the sweats. You know, going into the Rutland Centre, I didn't know where I was going, I didn't know what was going on. I just was, instead of going to prison, as far as I was concerned. And but when I went in there, it was the first time in my life I really felt that people cared. I really did. I got that sense of people were interested in me, and they were very concerned. And that's when things really, really changed for me. Because when I went back into that centre, everybody was delighted to see me. The hugs I was getting, you know, the only time I ever got hugs before was when I was playing football and I'd score a goal and I'd get a hug. And but this was genuine, and I felt somebody. I felt there was something. There was something, you know. There was a feeling there, a good feeling, you know. And I didn't experience very many of them growing up, you know. And so I clinged on to that, and I completed the treatment, and I got very much involved in getting other people help, and you know, over the next couple of years, you know, I became very active in that area, and out of the blue, this friend of mine, well, it turned out I was trying to get him into treatment at the time. He was on heroin as well, and he said to me, he had a van, and he said, if you get any work for the van, you can take the van and use it, you know. So one day he called me. He said he was after getting a call off a young band that was in the studio rehearsing for a tour they were starting. It was a young band called U2, you might have heard of. They just finished their recording, and I was asked to bring back the speakers to Windmill Lane. And when I was down there, I met this guy who was doing the sound, and he gave me a couple of numbers, a couple of contacts, and over the next couple of days I just rang a couple of contacts I was given, and basically I got a call one day out of the blue, and I was asked would I pick up a PA system for a band called Light a Big Fire.
Well, he gets up in the morning and straps on his routine, substituting ritual for where his anger should have been. And his friends are kind of scared of him, and they call him the machine. And he just laughs and laughs and laughs and laughs and laughs.
My first gig was in Athlone, actually, and I crashed the van that night. But I did the Irish tour with them, and straight away then they got a tour over in the UK supporting the Pogues in the 80s, and so we went straight onto that. And then when I went straight onto that, we did the European tour, and then we went back to Ireland, and I just continued on. Yeah, I worked with a lot of Irish artists. The likes of Mary Coughlan, Dolores Keane, Aslan, House, and some international artists too as well. Joe Ely, The Laz, Chris Christopherson, and Man of War. Because I remember we were coming up to do a gig up the north, and there was a sign where there's a place called Man of War, and your man said, "Stop the bus, stop the bus!" I stopped the bus, thought he was going to get sick or something. He jumped out over to the sign, took the sign down, you know. I had 2 big trucks and 2 minibuses, so 3 people working for me, and we'd probably be out on 2 tours at any given time, constantly. And that was my life, getting up in the morning, you know, doing all that sort of stuff, and going off and doing the gig, and then getting paid for it and getting well paid for it, you know. Everything was going great, you know, but I was starting to dabble again, and, you know, I was saying, oh, sure, I'll have the odd smoke, and then, you know, I ended up smuggling drugs, and I thought, you know, don't smuggle what you don't use yourself, and this is one of me. So I started, and before I knew it, I was back using. But I was now a businessman, and I was using cocaine. I'm not using heroin, I'm not a heroin addict. I'm not an addict. You know, I can use cocaine and, you know, king of my own castle. And I really believed that. And within a short this period of time, I'd sold all my buses. The last bus I sold was on the Nutgrove Avenue for £500. I got out of the bus, and the guy gave me £500 and said, "I'll drop the logbook into you tomorrow." And that was the last thing I did in the music business. My name is Frank. And Jesus, what's wrong now? Huh? You don't want to go? You don't want to go to the cliff? Where do you want to go? Giants Causeway. Anybody know where it is? Hands up who wants to go to the Giants Causeway, guys. Oh Jesus, do you all want to go? Oh, it's me that's on the wrong bus. I'm on the wrong bus, guys, again. No, we're going to the Giants Causeway. You know, when I was getting clean the second time, I was looking for something to do. You know, I was looking for something to do, keep me occupied, get going. And I got a phone call one day off a friend of mine down in the inner city. And he said, Frank, you know, there's a serious problem down here, down by the tennis court down here in Sheriff Street. And I said, well, you know, what's wrong? What's He said, well, there's going to be, there's a potential there that it's going to kick off. I said, why? He said, you know, it's for the local community, but there's people, particularly Chinese people, that are coming and taking the court early in the morning, and they're creating all this hassle with all the local community. And he said, like, something has to be done about it because, you know, it's going to kick off, you know. And then he invited me over to a meeting in the Department of Justice at the time. It was, and to kind of, just to come along and listen and that, you know. And it was at that meeting, actually, when I was listening to it, and I was hearing them talking about, you know, the local community are having problems with the new migrants coming in, and the migrants are doing this and they're taking the jobs and they're you know, the usual. And you know, what are we going to do? And, you know, and I remember sitting there thinking, well, you know, would you not welcome them in? I was actually thinking the opposite to what was being spoken about. And I just thought, you know, maybe do something positive, you know, to integrate them, you know. And then somebody said, well, like what? And I said, like a football tournament or something to do with sport, you know. They play tennis, they play basketball, they play soccer, so do we. I created this thing called Soccer Against Racism Ireland. And basically I was sitting in the office in Smithfield and I'd see somebody that was of a different colour or a different, you know, an Asian or a black person or somebody walking past the office, and I'd run out and I'd ask them, did they play football? But more than not, they said, yeah, you know. So I got their contact number, their name, and that's how I built it up. I rang them and I said, look, you know, do you know anybody else? And can you create a couple of people maybe for the seven-a-side football tournament? We did something like 12 football teams, and they were mixed of, you know, like, for example, if people were from Nigeria, all the Nigerians would play on that team. Local community, then they'd have their own team. Chinese, for example, would be only Chinese people on that. And then I straight away got stick for, well, how is that integrating? Do you know what I mean? Like, you have Chinese people playing on the same team, you have the Africans playing on the same team. And, you know, I said, well, look, you got to start somewhere. And Sari developed out of that. It became like a full-day tournament, and then it became a two-day tournament, and then it became a three-day tournament. When I started with Sari, as I said, it was about 12 teams. So I suppose in the height of Sari's success in relation to the festival, the Soccer Fest, you would have 48 teams, you'd have their supporters, you'd have theirs. So you're talking maybe 2,000-3,000 people. And at this stage, it got so big that we had to have it in, there's a big park in the Phoenix Park in Dublin, one of the biggest parks in Europe, actually. When I realised that it wasn't one-off was when it started to make an impression, you know. It was actually having an impact in the local communities, you know, because now people were finding they were getting jobs because they were a good footballer, and they were linked in, and somebody say, oh, listen, you know, will you play for my football team? Sign for us. I'll get you a job, or I'll look after you, or, you know, I'll give you some sort of reward, you know. And of course they said, absolutely, you know. So they were integrating with the community, they were getting jobs, they were making friends, and it was working. When I set up Sari, and I did it voluntary, whilst I was doing it voluntary, I did a licence to get a taxi. So I was part-time taxiing and part-time doing Sari. So the taxiing that I was doing was financing Sari with the goodwill of the people that I knew as well. So there was no budget really. It was just on a daily basis. So at night I'd go out into in my taxi, and then in the day, I'd work on Sari. We were based, I had an office in Smithfield, a room in Smithfield that kind of catered for the needs of Sari at the time. And then I had people that were completely 100% voluntary on this. Nobody got paid. And I got a phone call off a guy to say, you know, we're from an organisation, we come in, like to have a chat with you, blah, blah, blah. And I remember going into the office and putting stuff out in the office, pretending that it was busy, so we were doing things, you know. And the guy came in to see, and I hadn't got a clue what he was on about. I hadn't got a clue what he was talking about. And he was telling me about this, this is an organisation, it's called One Foundation, and we look at people around the world and we see what work they're doing, and you know, they're off the radar with regards to funding from, you know, government agencies and all that. And Sari, actually the work you're doing with Sari completely fits the bill for what we're looking for. It's called Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, and we're willing to look at people that are doing ordinary, extraordinary things for their communities. And Sari ticks all the boxes. Would I be interested in getting involved with them? And basically I said, how much? The 3rd of January, I looked into my bank account, seeing how much I had left in my account, I suppose. And there was a €96,000 lodgement made by One Foundation to my account. And I actually rang the guy. His name, he's a well-known entrepreneur in Ireland. And I rang him and I said, excuse me, I said, what do I have to do for this? And he said, do what you're doing, but do it full time. Yeah, I ran Sari was running, and it's still running actually. It's still up and running, it's still going. But you know, things came to a head with me. I was 14 years involved. I probably was doing it at a full-time level around 7 years, maybe. But it was after 14 years, you know, of doing it, you know, my demons came back to me, and you know, I started to use drugs again, thinking I could handle it this time around, you know, and I went downhill rapidly. I knew I was ruining it. I knew it was going to the wall, and I couldn't function in it. On the outside, I looked fine and I looked okay, but I was messing up all over the place. I wouldn't turn up at meetings. I wouldn't go to conferences. I just was forgetting things. Yeah, I mean, the other things was my marriage was gone. You know, I wasn't there for my wife. I'd gotten married, and you know, we'd bought a house, stopped paying the mortgage on the house. You know, stopped turning up at home. You know, staying out all night. All sorts of stuff was happening, and everything was dwindling. Not just Sari, but my home life as well. My relationship with my wife, and you know, it all took its toll. Just everything folded like a domino effect, you know, and then I had to make the decision. Well, actually, the decision was made for me within the organisation of Sari that, you know, I should go, you know, and of course, you know, I wanted to keep face, but I knew it was over. I knew it was over. I tried to get clean back in 2010, and I kind of knew, you know, I've been through other, you know, treatment centres before, and I've been down this road before a few times, and I just needed to get out. And there was a guy, a friend of mine, who I actually got clean with a few years previous, and I'd actually met him on the road. He just said to me, look, you know, there's a place in Thailand. It's an amazing place. Can't tell you too much about it because you have to experience it, but it's worth a go if you want to get clean. And I said, yeah, I do. And so I headed over to Thailand. It's called Tamperbok. When I arrived there, the guy that I'd met in Dublin was waiting at the gate for me. Of the detox in the monastery. So I went and I did a detox for 7 days in there, you know. You have to do what they call the vomit, which is basically getting sick every day for 7 days. They give you a kind of medicine, maybe a glass, just, the way I describe it is just brown muck, you know, and you drink that and you vomit, you know. But after, you know, I tried to vomit. I couldn't get sick after a few attempts, and but the medicine stayed in me, and it was the most horrible feeling I've ever had in my life. And after about 4 hours, then it came out the other end. Yeah, no, it's hard to explain what happened in that monastery, but something certainly really clicked with me. I mean, I'd been through treatment centres before, I've been through counsellors before, I've been through detoxes before, I've been through a lot of detoxification programs and treatment centres, and you know, I think this was different, and it was different in the sense that they left you be, you know, like I was expecting to be kind of religious or whatever, you know, but you know, after the first 7-10 days anyway, they left you be. They left you be, and you know, it was up to yourself whether you wanted to be serious about getting your life together. And you know, I didn't really know how I was going to do it, you know, and I still don't know how. But what I've learned from that monastery experience, from the Buddhists, was that I needed to look inside myself, and I really needed to see what kind of a personality I have, what makes me tick, you know, what makes me sort of, you know, why do I get angry all the time? All those questions I had. Why do I keep going back to using drugs? I remember having a chat with one of the monks one day, and I was talking to him about these issues, and he said, well, look, you know, he said, you know, at the end of the day, he said, you were just a kid. You know, if you can take yourself out of that emotion, if you can take yourself out of you and look at it as a kid, a 4-year-old kid, first time ever going to school, first day in school, getting violently assaulted by a nun. I mean, that's serious, and I never thought of it that way. That kid, as he was saying to me, that kid didn't have a great start in life. Why wouldn't that kid be angry? Why wouldn't that kid be self-conscious? Why wouldn't that kid not have any confidence? You know, and I seen it in a different light. I looked back and I seen it as a different person, almost, you know. And I looked at it that way and I went, wow, you know, this particular monk that I was hanging out with, and that made a lot of sense to me, and I suppose I was using him as my peer, using him as my counsellor or whatever, you know, and it bounced things off him, you know. He was an artist. He was an artist, and he was brilliant, a brilliant artist, still is. I was into art many years before that, and I loved art, you know. And one day I was talking to him about the Christian Brothers and how I had to sit on my left hand because I was left-handed, and that's, you know, that's the devil, you know, and you know, getting my knuckles rattled many times because I was trying to use my left hand. I couldn't use my right hand, I was left-handed, you know, and I used to have to sit on it, and I was telling them stories, and he said, really? He said, wow. And he said, you know, luckily you're not into art. He says, you know, you wouldn't be able to do art if you weren't able to use your hands, you know. You could use your feet, I suppose, he said. And he was kind of making a big joke of it, and then he handed me a brush. And he said, do you like art? I said, yeah, well, I used to do it, I love it. And I just started painting. And I spent the next couple of weeks up in his place just painting, you know. And before I knew it, I think there was 4 canvases done, and everybody was admiring them, you know. And I thought, well, there is something in this left hand, you know. When I tried to meditate, what was coming into my meditation was all colours, and maybe I could do this painting, maybe I could do that painting, maybe, you know. But I started to relax, and before I knew it, I was doing 40 minutes meditation, and I felt great after it. And then I just freely painted, and colours would come out, or designs would come out. I didn't even know what I was painting, and everybody's coming up saying, "Oh, that's amazing!" I felt brilliant. I felt brilliant for those few moments. I felt brilliant. You know, it was like a feeling I had when I used to play football, actually, years before I took up drugs. I remember that feeling when I'd score a goal. You know. During those 6 years of coming back and forth from Thailand, I mean, I was also trying to deal with my recession as we all know, the recession hit, and you know, a lot of people lost lots of things, and so did I. And I set out about trying to sort of, I suppose, express myself, and there was a lot of frustration, and you know, like I lost during the recession, you know, as I said, my marriage and things like that went, and you know, but the art was in my head, and you know, and I remember like what really got me to do the €1 billion house was a series of events, and really the one that kind of clinched it for me was that, you know, a friend of mine who had made a lot of money, and he you know, he was a great guy, and he had been clean 27 years, you know, and he lived in, you know, one of the top places in County Dublin, and you know, big house on the hill, and he owned a castle, and he had all this business and all this going. And I got a phone call one day to say that he hung himself. And I couldn't believe it, and I was right in sort of, you know, thinking about my mortgage and thinking about this and that. And I remember thinking, that's it. I'm not worrying about this anymore. I can only do my best. I'd nowhere to live. I was living in a shed, you know. And the last bit of money I had, which was €2,000, I went to Sligo and bought a camper, Leyland, a conversion truck into it. It was converted into a camper, and I bought it in Sligo about 11 o'clock at night with no backlights working, and I got 2 bicycle lights, and I put them in the back, and I drove it down to Dublin, and I had it parked up. The next day I met the guy's brother, and he asked me, you know, would I carry the coffin and, you know, do things like that, you know, when we were burying him, and yeah, so he happened to say to me, where are you living? And I said, in a minibus, in a camper bus. He said, where? I said, well, actually, I have nowhere to put it. He said, well, why don't you put it down in the garden of his brother's house? You can put it there, you know. And I said, brilliant, excellent. And I did, and I lived in it for a while. And then, you know, the estate went over to the family, and they were seeing what to do, and they asked me then to, you know, mind the house whilst they were trying to sell it and that, you know. And so I moved from the mobile. I moved from the mobile into the house, you know. But it was ironic because, like, I was coming out and there's a huge big jacuzzi in the front of the house, and all you can see is the sea outside. And a beautiful house, absolutely wonderful, Japanese gardens at the back, amazing. And I hadn't got the price of a cup of coffee. So when I was in the house, I really got down to working on the paintings. I found it very hard. I had no inspiration. So one day I came up with a great idea, actually by accident. You know, every day banks, they take money out of circulation for one reason or another. Too old, cut, or whatever. You know, when they get rid of money, they shred it, and then they compress it, and it comes out like a brick of a house, you know. And they reckon there's like €50,000 worth of a brick there. And I remember a friend of mine had used it as confetti at my wedding in 2005, and I had 2 bricks over from it. I got 2 bricks off him, and there was one just brick sitting on the thing. And I remember I was frustrated, and I turned and I kicked the brick, and I had been working on a painting which was glued. Actually, there was a lot of glue on it, and all the shred, when it shredded, it stuck to the canvas. Oh, I thought that's nice, you know. So I did it, and I ended up doing a canvas with the money on it, you know. I thought that's really nice. And then a week later, I'm wrapping up with Sari, as I said, and I'm in one of the director's office. And I remember being in his office, and he said to me, "You do a bit of art, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do us a painting there." And I did him a painting with €40,000 of shredded money as the design, you know. So that was my first painting I did with the money. And then I started, and I ended up actually doing, it was called Cash for Canvas exhibition as part of, it was a coin collection fair in the RDS, and the guy seen a few of the paintings I had done, and he said, would I come down and I exhibit a couple of paintings, and I did. And the Central Bank of Ireland were next to me on the stall, and this lady noticed that the paintings was done with the shredded money. She thought it was brilliant, and she gave me her email, and she says, if I can help you in any way, let me know. And so after that exhibition, I had the paintings in the car,
I'm sitting outside a guy's office block in Smithfield, thinking, where do I put them now? What will I do now? And I looked over and I seen this big glass building, 6 stories high. It just had been finished just as the recession hit. So it was brand new, nobody had used it. And I remember seeing some furniture in it a few months earlier. And I thought maybe there's, so I seen the number over and I rang the number, got talking to the agent. He said, oh, that's that Cash for Canvas exhibition. There was a piece they did in the paper about it, and he had read it. I said, yeah, I said, I have the paintings there. I just wanted to, see, could I display them and maybe in that place. So he gave me the owner's number, and that was a Monday. I rang him on the Wednesday. I met him on the Thursday, and I got the keys on the Friday. And I moved in on the Monday. The 1st of December, 2011, is when I started it. And suppose we're one month into it now. 12 hours a day, every day. I had no Christmas. And I went in and basically I signed a lot of papers and they gave me a loan of it. So, because you need licenses to transport it, because it's money, it's cash. And so they supported me and they said, yeah. So I went over to the Mint and I collected 2 trailerfuls of shredded notes, 1.4 billion euro. Well, now the way to calculate it would be these bricks here, they're 6 inches by 2 inches. So these bricks here are 48, 50,000, the equivalent of notes used in them. So you calculate it, there's 800 bricks on the front, the shredded would be 200 inside, so calculating it and how many bricks I have. And I'm sitting in my studio and I'm sitting and having my feet up on a box with 4 million euro in it of shredded notes, And I just thought, God, this is just paper. This is just people committing suicide. There's people, just the craziness of it and the whole thing. And, I felt there was no debate. There was nothing going on. You didn't have a say. Ordinary people just don't have a say. And people are getting very frustrated. And so I just felt there needs to be a debate on this. These kids in schools need to come down and see and get talking about it and, get people in to give talks and things like that. And to really kind of get the debate going on, what does it mean? What does currency mean? What is currency can't be, the hold on everything. It can't be, it's taking people's lives, it's ruining people. People are very nervous. They won't even talk about it today, And then Wednesday, it just hit, it just went off the radar. The first call I got was from Canada, and then I got a call from Australia and New Zealand, and, just CNN, NBC, it just took off. It just took off. For the next 7 months, I had every news station, I think, in the world. There's people ringing me from Thailand, from Pakistan, from Canada, from Spain that were on their holidays or whatever, saying, oh, I seen you in the paper. It was in every newspaper. It just took off and people got it. The New York Times heading was, I never forget it, it was not worth the paper it's built from, And it was built from 1.4 billion euro. Do you know what I mean? And it was only paper. And I was finding myself talking about, what money means, which is nothing. It's an IOU. It's a piece of paper. When I did the €1 billion house, after that was finished, I thought, what am I going to do now? What do you do? How can you, they say you're as good as your last gig. How do you beat that, And I really did want to continue on doing art and things like that, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. So I thought, go out and get a real job, So I started with Paddywagon just immediately after the €1 billion house, and I haven't looked back. I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm happy out now. I'm as content as I ever was in my life.
Just in our autumn lane, walk together beside each other in the rain.
My life hasn't been like a typical person's life. I suppose my life has been like a roller coaster. A lot of ups and a lot of downs. But overall, when I look back, I have to say I'm quite content and happy with my life. I didn't have a great start. Like I was carrying a lot of baggage, a lot of negativity, but I rose above them. Because, I was always open to a lot of the good things that was coming my way.
It's like a dream that we had. The rain could not bring us down. We could not ignore.
Most people think that there's only one way of living your life, but there isn't. Your life is like a blank canvas. You sit down, clear your mind, and then you start painting.
We've just come past Berlin and we're on our way up towards the ferry, which is only about 17 hours away. But here, where we were, they were huge, you've seen yourself, huge buildings. And it was just one expression, and it was shock. You know, it was shock. It was very sad. It is very sad what's going on, you know.